Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to our final keynote today. This is the third evening of pre-conference keynotes for the Learning Revolution Conference. It's so fun to have Bernajean Porter here with us. Bernajean, welcome.
Thank you. It's my delight, and I see a few troublemakers in the group, so I'm excited about that. I just want to ask you to use the chat box. Many of you to introduce where you're from and what intrigued you that you would give up some of your precious time tonight. So if you'll put that in the chat box, we'll kind of take it away. Steve, do you have anything else you want to add?
I do. Thanks to ClassFlow for their support of this and the Reinventing the Classroom Conference, which is next week. And thanks, of course, always to Blackboard Collaborate for this amazing platform. For those of you who are joining us live, you can indicate now where in the world you are at the moment. Look for the star icon. It's the second one down to the left of the map. Click on it twice and then click on the map. New Zealand and India, you have been such fun having sessions today for you. Piyush, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly, but I'm guessing it's very early morning for you. Maybe a little bit later.
And Piyush, do I know you? I've been doing a lot of work in Mumbai.
South Dakota, I'm in North Carolina, looks like Peggy in Arizona. Bernajean, where are you?
I'm in the middle, maybe too high, but I'm in Boulder. Are you hearing my voice?
We are.
Okay. Yeah, I live in Boulder, Colorado, and I do a lot of work in Mumbai, so I guess I was interested in if, I know I'm not saying this correctly, sorry, Piyush, but what part of India are you from? 6:30 a.m. That's not too bad.
Okay, I'm going to turn the time over to you, Bernajean. I will queue up your videos. I'll be watching the chat and calling me for anything you need.
Great. Thank you, Steve. I love working with you, and I appreciate this partnership and all the people who've given us their time tonight. So keep your questions and conversation in the chat box, and I will be watchful of that. I guess what I'd like to start with is introduce myself a little bit. Some of you know me, but after a long, long time, I find myself making the best trouble in the world being a digital educator, that through technology we can open up conversations and doors to make more happen for kids. Right now I'm presently an online teacher and avatar teacher, although I'm on-site doing in-residence programs. But this is through ASB Online, which is one of the partners, I believe, with Learning Revolution. And what they have is 4 courses that I've developed to culminate in a certificate, graduate credit called The Art of Multimedia Communication and Digital Storytelling. And I love the fact that these courses have, like the one I'm doing right now is applied storytelling. And we have about 5 countries of teachers coming together. Futuring is one of 14 categories of applying storytelling in the world to generate influence and impact power, whether you're marketing products, nonprofits, trying to make changes in the world, and in our case, it's the world of education. So I'll just start with there and say I'm really proud of the kind of people I'm working with and how educators are stepping up to make a difference. I love this quote because I really feel like maybe, like me, that how are we going to mobilize ourselves to create new learning spaces and environments that our youth really deserves? And it turns out we can't push against what's in place, that one of the things we do is to really build something that has the kind of compassion and passion to say, well, here's something over here that I want even more. So even if it's creating it in our mind's eye, we want compelling and dynamic possibilities to be on the table that people will organize around. So I'm going to use that word passion for tonight. If you need to take it down a little bit for the culture that you're in, feel free to do that. But that's what I'd like to talk about tonight, that the learning revolution and the work that many of us have been doing is really about how do we create these new models and get our toes in the door and make them be real and not just things we talk about. And storytelling is going to be that avenue. Really, over the years, I've been part of a number of things that have brought me to this place, and one of them is holding IF conferences. So inventing that future. There's a model from Future Searches, which I'm trained in, that's used by businesses. And what they do is jump into the future and create the news story that they want their business or organization or maybe it's a town to be able to tell. So I love that idea of inventing the future, and there's something behind that that really works around engaging large groups of people. We used this process, a modified form of the Future Search in Illinois when we did the blueprint planning, the expectation that there would be throughout the state of Illinois, and that's almost 800 school districts, having community-based planning in order to qualify for funding with their tech plans. And we brought large groups of people together into those meetings and asked them to write a story of the future and to imagine what they do want to have happen around technology, learning, and kids come together. What's the story they want to happen? And we had great results out of that in terms of community participation and a kind of passion that unleashed at those meetings. One of them was very creative ways to get money to fund their passions. I was told quite a few times that didn't I understand that money was tight. And it turns out when people have dreams in their heart, money is just a rock in the road to get over. But you have to really have that passion. So I found towns doing things like after the meeting, they were saying, we're not going home, we're not waiting for state money, we have to start today. And one guy dedicated his windows, I'm not talking technology now, a construction company, all his second windows to be auctioned off and funding. And somebody said, well, we really want partnerships with AT&T, but it turns out that by auctioning those windows off, they raised twice the amount of money that they had for their student dollars in every other category. This man wanted to fund the dream that he could feel in his heart at that meeting, and it was not a tech plan. I want you to hear this thought that Martin Luther King never said, I have a strategic plan and a purchasing order. He had a dream that he talked about and built the story of what it would look like and feel like until it lived in people's hearts. The other place that I did a lot of the future searches in was in Denver Public Schools, who was going out for a referendum of a community that was hit up pretty hard, a lot of senior citizens, and they really couldn't see a way to get people to pass this referendum that they needed to wire their buildings and get some traction on getting technology in their schools. So we devised a sort of modified future search again, where we held 5 community regional meetings. And there was a process for looking at strategic stakeholders in the room. In fact, it's important that up to 40% of your group be external people. So I will just speak to that and say we have 300 to 400 people at every single meeting. And as we gathered those stories together, it turned out that there was a thread of commonality between all 5 of those groups, that they built not only their referendum agenda, but their tech plan around. And even though the tech plan became obsolete, I was told 7 years later that that meeting, the dreams that people had in their heart, really still fortified their programs that they tried to be reaching. So I'm just going to give you a little piece of this and saying like, well, if you're going to put people in a room and we're going to build a common vision, where do we start? Well, we start with the stories that they want to tell and got people into groups, mixed groups like students, community members, politicians from the community, parents, teachers. And in those groups of 3 to 4 people, they developed their story. And then we shared those and we looked at what's the common qualities that appeared in the stories. And I'm here to tell you something that will be hard to believe. Not one story in any one of those meetings or in Illinois said I want better test scores. that I want my kids to reach standards. Not one of them had that as a part of the story. So this energy field that I'm sharing up here comes from Meg Wheatley and sort of the idea of chaos and leadership in the new science. But that energy from the individuals and that many people being involved created a group visioning process that then creates a collective vision and changes individual behavior and changes the organization's behavior. It has huge power to collectively tell our stories, and even though they may have had different perspectives, the commonality of that really moves agendas ahead. And that's why I became involved in the storytelling process and maybe using it with schools to say, how do we lift ourselves up out of that old story and shake off things that are not the kind of stories that we want for our kids? There's a word for this. It's morphogenic fields or story fields. It's a kind of gravity field that gets created in which these are the stories we tell, and the more passionate they are, the more influence power they have. So there is a science behind this process that's used by businesses and communities that I would love to see happen more in schools. I don't see a lot of it, but I had 2 or 3 experiences where I know that it works. So morphogenic, that's one of your science words for the night. So here's what happens in those community meetings where you gather everyone together, a sort of mixed group of 3 to 4. We write a narrative story one day in the life of a student. And if you want to, you can say in the life of an educator or the life of a parent, but we focused on the kids. And we asked them to write 1 page. It needed to be 7 to 12 years from now, like stretched out into the future. It was first person with lots of rich details of showing, not telling, because that grabs the imagination and makes it feel alive. And of course, I have to say, we wanted it to be positive. We don't need any, fearful stories. And then this is really, really important for your own goals and for, working with kids. It needs to be present tense as if it were already happening. To keep it in, it will happen, always pushes it out into the horizon and does not take it into people's hearts. So you're really acting as if you have arrived into your best, perfect story. So I'm just checking my notes here, and I'd like, Steve, for you to play the first video clip that we have and then give me a chance to set it up here called TAMS. This is a business organization that wanted to create an online environment, and it was a number of years ago where people didn't really get what it meant. So they created a future story of what it would be like for a student to be inside of their learning environment. So I'm just going to have Steve show that to you. It's called TAMS.
I'm going to put it in the web tour. I'm also going to put a link in the chat if for some reason you have trouble with YouTube. Here we go.
Although education reform is missing new
I'd love to hear your reaction to seeing a scenario kind of come alive with multimedia for a concept for schools. And I'll take one or two comments, and then I can do other things. But I'd like to have the audience participate.
Which you can do by putting a note in the chat, or I'm going to give everyone microphone privileges. I think Bernajean would be comfortable with that, and you can just turn your microphone on by hitting the talk button if you'd like.
Thanks, Steve. Peggy says she's still watching it, so that may be true for others. I think Maureen is wanting to talk, maybe. I'm going to ask you if that story felt real.
The little blue bubbles next to the names that have the lines in them means they're typing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me respond to some of the notes here. It's great. You know, Tam never lifted off. So this is the front end of what people were trying to make happen. But it guided lots of their choices, and I still use it when we try to think about what's the next generation of online. The goal here is to imagine what you do want and not be tied to reality. I love this quote: reality is the leading cause of stress for those who choose to be in touch with it. So it's why we jump you 7 to 12 years out at least, so that you're not tied to, is it possible today? And then you backfill with, what do you have to do to begin to make that happen? And in my community meetings with businesses, where communities actually jump ahead 50 years, they don't dabble with the 7 to 12 years, they don't deal with reality. They're saying, this is something we want for our community, and then everyone in the room, from their perspective, takes on what are they going to do to begin today to make that story be the one that's told. So it's a process that really stems from how the brain works with storytelling. And it is one of the features in my applied storytelling thing, and you can look it up online, Brains on Stories, that the amygdala and some other chemicals start to be released, like the cortisols, the oxytocins, you know, the dopamine squirts, that the brain doesn't react to facts. Facts do not cause people to take action. It's the storytelling. And you don't want just storytelling or just facts, but we're using facts like research-based decision-making. People don't make decisions based on research. I don't know if you've noticed, but generally people are taking action and then, you know, going out and finding the research to support their decision-making. Before multimedia came in these previous events, what we did is, after we put the tech plan together, we created little vignettes, narrative vignettes of real personal narratives of what it would look like if these goals came alive and people walked inside of the schools and saw it happening. But we can't start with, can it be real, do we have the technology? Because all the technologies get invented around what people imagine. And so the culture, the technologies we need, what we need to have happen, start with, what is it that you want? And it can't be a shopping list. So, you know, this is not a whole night focused on this, but I just want you to know it's something that exists in the world. The Art of the Long View is a wonderful book that talks about what happened to a corporation, an oil company, Shell Oil, who did this scenario building around the imagined idea of oil not being available from the Middle East. They were the only oil company that not only survived the oil embargo from the Middle East to the United States, but they thrived in it because people jumped into the story that they already knew and understood. Not a strategic plan, but how they were going to be as a company if that happened. So it's really a powerful brain-based strategy, and it attaches people to it in their imagination. So here's something to take any kind of vision that you might have, whether it's a personal vision or a school vision or a corporation vision. I take whatever's on the table, and before we do any kind of strategic planning, I want to know what's the zest or the passion. Rank that 0 to 10, and we would put it up on the wall and give people dots so that they could physically, kinesthetically do that. What do you believe is the ownership and the urgency? And when you get done on a scale of 0 to 10, you're going to have a visual map that sort of gives you a collective look at where people's commitment is. We often have vision statements that people don't identify with. They may know the vocabulary, but they're not feeling any urgency or zest. So no reason to have strategic plans if you don't have that. And you cannot change from the Titanic to another kind of ship and reorganize all that without ownership and passion. There's work ahead. And in fact, what I would say to you, is that in a case of 0 to 10, you need at least a 7 or above for there to be energy to be able to live into the new vision. And if you have less than 7, you have work to do around socializing and getting commitment around that vision having viability in your system. And I shifted onto this because I guess I feel like I don't need to talk about this a lot with the kind of people who are in the room, but I want to know, what are we, our cultures and our communities, pretending not to know? And I don't care if you're in Canada or India or Dubai or where you're at, international schools or local schools, our kids are bored. They are not committed to school. They are showing up out of compliance. They are volunteer learners. And the stats everywhere is about 77% of the kids, specifically starting in 7th grade, finding themselves uninterested and unmotivated by school. And I will just say that at this point, when you are bored, it thins the membranes of the cortex. It changes the physiology of the brain. So this is not about them sucking it up. And I hope that's not a bad word. Delete it if it is. I mean, we just say, like, go put up with it. But you have long-term boredom. You have atrophy. And those kind of schools are never going to commit our kids to be able to be their best in schools. I don't know about you, but after years of being out here and having those kinds of conversations and putting the stats on the table, I feel like I need a little fortifying because I get world weary. So I just think this is a quote that I keep in my heart, and it's one I use in my program that says, the world needs all the good I can do. So I'm just going to get up every day and put my drop into the world. Our kids are going to literally be inheriting the earth. And I want to know, are we doing school for the politicians and external pressures like mandates, or are we somewhere in the zone of serving our kids to inherit that earth and being ready for it? So with that kind of conversation, I decided to take the storytelling skills and the idea of future searches, plus some wonderful research in the world, and create this program. So I'm going to shift from future searches to systems to individuals. And this is a program that I call I Imagine Taking My Place in the World. And for when I'm doing teacher workshops, I do I Imagine Waking Up a Generation for Their Own Greatness. And what that looks like is taking a look at our kids and not seeing them as test scores or kids and their behaviors who might be bored and acting out, but they're about growing into the life of what they imagine to be. And if they have a blank screen, we're in trouble. So one of the things I want to look at is, do we know our kids' dreams and talents? And if there's anyone in the room, I'd like to tell you that the word educate has so much power in it. Educate means to unleash potential. And if that were our daily mission, and if that were built into our vision and our decisions and the way we do curriculum in school, I can only imagine the amazingness that we would unleash into the world. So taking that in hand, this is what I really have in my heart. Every child should know that there's something good and unique about them. That standardizing them is not going to serve the kind of fast-paced change and diversity that's needed in the world to deal with that. That they have value, and I want them to know that when they're 3 and 5 and 7 and 12 and through their early preteens. And is that a conversation that lives in our hearts and the way we do business with kids? I heard something the other day, and I sort of get it because our teachers also need their spirits raised. But I have teachers explain to me they just didn't have time to learn kids' names. And I thought, are you kidding me? The name is the very essence of who they are, and if you don't have time for that, what are you doing? So we have a lot of kids who say, well, no one's ever asked me, what's my dream? What am I interested in? You know, what's my passion? And sometimes these kids have blank screens because no one's asked them. They've sat in the seat that says, your job is to get good test scores so that the school understands I'm doing a good job as a teacher and I can move forward in my career. But at the end of the day, it's not about our careers. And I know that's tough when there's so much clouds and threats over our heads. So I guess I'd like to talk about passion. But I think someone called Sir Ken Robinson, and this is the first clip for you, Steve, to show. Ken Robinson has a book called Elements. And I think I took this clip from a presentation when I shared the stage with him. He is awesome about this. So let's show it now, and it has to do with kids and adults in the world living their passions. Steve, I don't know what that is.
Oh,
Are you
I'm
clapping?
not, but you're good to go.
Okay. Well, here's what we want to start to sort out with our kids, and it takes a little bit of awakening a dreamer and believer in themselves in doing that. So I ask, what makes your heart sing? Where does that energy come from that says, I'm going to do this whether I get paid or I don't get paid? And certainly lots of teachers find their passion to be about working with kids and find their energy drained when the kinds of work that they're being required to do is not fitting. I don't know what that is. It's not fitting the work that they want to do with kids. Steve, can you hear that clicking?
Good. It sounds like it's coming through your microphone, so I don't know what it might be.
All right, I don't either.
Odd.
Wow.
Let's try going back to the web tour and then coming back to see if that releases anything. Is it distracting for you?
I'm not touching anything. Well, it'll just, I don't know, it sounds like it'll show up. So I can speak through it, see if we can't figure it out. Ah, thank you. All right. Here we go. What makes your heart sing? So here is the curriculum. You can get it on my website, or you can just take the ideas I'm going to talk about and run with it. But there's a teacher guide that walks the teacher through kind of pre-writing activities, and it gives them lots of tips and pieces to do that. And then there's a student scrapbook that they actually keep. Now, I am not touching anything right now, but what I'd like to say is that as we think about leaving this out for the kids to do this, one dimension that I didn't have when I did my future searches is multimedia. We're going to ask kids to create visions and vision videos. And when you use multimedia, it triple codes. That means it gives sticking power in terms of the senses. The more senses that are engaged in that new story, the more the mind and heart and spirit attaches to that. So I think there's something called PBL, which we hear a lot about, but I think of it as passion-based learning. And here are 3 books that if I'm doing this program school-wide or with a class that we want parents and teachers to invest in, and all of them talk about the same thing. I use the word light, but it's the same thing, is identifying that essence of you, the gift that you have that you need to be giving the world, and finding that and nurturing that over time through curriculum. This is Peter Benson's research from his book of Sparks. And I love the idea that by letting kids feel and understand what their value is in the world, we get all the agendas we want. They get like an academic partner in school that's invested in grades for their own intrinsic motivation, attendance higher, healthier, you know, a sense of purpose. We actually get less bullying and less violence in schools. And gosh, these are all good things that are part of what we would like to have happen, especially when you think about 77% of the kids being disconnected. But it's a shift from external to intrinsic forces that Peter has. And I'm going to ask you to, just a minute, I guess that'll be a little bit later. Sorry, looking at my notes. So here's what the I Imagine curriculum does, but again, you can do your own. We work on having vision videos where kids go through the process of identifying their strengths and interests and talents, but especially finding their light. And then they jump 20 years into the future as if they've arrived in the future in future tense. And there's a kind of impact on the brain because the brain doesn't know past tense, present tense, future tense. So if you're chanting a new story, there's a neuroplasticity, a sort of chemical change that occurs and changes the brain in the wiring, the way you're wired. And kids who make these videos watch them 30 and 50 times. So it really, with that triple coding, deepens that track and believability and kind of sets a multimedia goal in front of them. One school that I know that did this used it for counseling. When a kid messed up, which is kind of their job when they're young, they would come to the counselor or the principal for the "You Have Done Wrong" song. And the first thing they would do is show them the vision video and turn to the child or student, excuse me, and say, what have you done today that may have gotten in your way of having the dream you want? What other choices could you have made so that you can keep moving towards the future you want? So it was sort of a self-coaching and self-commensurance instead of the adult saying, you have broken one of the adult rules. You need to do it better. And I really like that. And I would say middle and high school, but I do have young kids very early. I'm going to show you an example at the end, doing aspects of this in as early as 3 and 4, 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, and certainly 5 and 6-year-olds. But the sort of deep docudramas, I think, start to happen at 11 and 12. I still haven't found many schools investing in this, although it's my advocation is I don't know how we do school if we don't know what that is. Here is the question, the sort of story prompt, how will you shine your light for good in the world? And this is not a career exploration. I don't want to know what job you have. We don't know what jobs are going to belong to the future. I want you to know when you have energy, when your heart sings, when you feel nourished inside, and a sense of who you are. And finding that is very different than saying I'm talented in something. I'm going to give you a couple of stories here in a minute. But this is what we're looking at, is finding the difference. And we have a lot of kids who have talents, and their parents get all invested in, well, this is what they're going to do because they're talented. But talent is only where your interests and strengths come together and because you spend time. I had one parent, we did this as a prototype with 90 kids in Minot, North Dakota, brought them all together for 2 or 3 days, and wow, was that great energy. And I had one parent say, well, I don't know why she wants to be a physical therapist. She's so good in the violin. I'm sure that's what she's going to do. And I said, that's not what she has in her heart. She has this other work in her heart. And they said, well, are you sure if she doesn't spend a couple more years getting better at the violin? I said, has nothing to do with that. It totally changed the dynamics at home and the conversations at home to know the difference between a talent and a light. And sometimes talents and strengths can be your light, but they're not the same. Interests are going to change over time. Talent is what you invest in. And strengths are certainly things that come to you, like I'm pretty good at talking and I'm really glad for it. It's not my light, but it's a strength I've had since the time I was probably, I understood I started walking at 9 months and talking at 10 months, my poor parents. But we work hard with the teachers and kids to sort out the difference between these, and we work with the scrapbooks. So now I'd like you to share the Peter Benson Spielberg video about what is a strength and a talent, because it really surprises the kids when they're not doing career exploration. What do you think about that story? You know, when you think about your gifts, sometimes kids don't want to put out there, you know, what their gift is. And I just like to share one more story that comes from my life. We had a young nephew who, like starting at age 5, loved magic. And he would set up his little magic puppet theater and do this at family meetings and, you know, gatherings and picnics and birthday, and we all clapped at him. But by the time he got to middle school, everybody's saying, you know, you're going to start to be weird. You're going to have to give up the magic and do something serious with your life. His name was Joey. And poor Joey, this seemed to kind of be a passion. I mean, he just couldn't get off the topic of looking at tricks and practicing them and certainly using his family as a major audience. So even though he went to middle school, it stayed a major interest to him, and he did get made fun of for that, but his passion was stronger than the kind of bullying. But his parents really worked hard to say, you know, please don't reveal that part of yourself. And today, Joey has won the Close-Up World Cup for Close-Up Magic 3 times, and he makes a living inventing tricks for other magicians. I think we have to be careful not to dismiss those elements that don't seem like careers, and whether he used it for personal fun, I remember a family meeting, gathering to celebrate an engagement, and I don't know how he did this, but he got Kylie's engagement ring inside of a cracker box, inside the ripped open brown paper, and she was really upset because she thought she lost her ring. But, you know, maybe it would have just stayed a personal joy, or maybe it would have stayed something he did to earn money for community foundations. Maybe it turns into a career. But at any level, it should always be nurtured because it is that part of them that's alive. And there's many, many stories like that inside the Sparks and Element books and the Nurturing the Strengths. Sometimes we have to give them pre-writing, and I start with metaphors. Metaphors are very safe and, you know, fun and exploratory. So again, we have to get kids out of this, what am I going to be to grow up, and will people laugh at what I think I am? And so there's a lot of exploratory things. If you were a bird, you would be because. And we have collages where we engage in the multiple intelligence of hands-on art activities and visual activities, but we ask kids to find anything that represented the best of who they were and create collages, and we surrounded the room with that and put them in the hall, and they made miniatures of these to put into their scrapbooks. And then we did this activity where they went around and interviewed all the people in the world with what's the top 3 or 4 words that would describe me, and they had to be positive words because that's what a future vision is. And we brought them back and put them in the computer, and then we had the kids in the classroom do a round robin on the computers and add in 3 more words that would describe these kids. And we generated Wordles that we then ironed on T-shirts, so we would always have these sort of Wordle days. The best of me, you're wearing the best of who you are and the best of who people think you are. So again, there's a kind of pre-writing activities that go into that. And they had so much fun. I put a box of stickers and things out, you know, and it really invited them to do what they wanted to do with this. And it can't be done with a digital scrapbook. People wanted to do that, but I'm saying, please leave the kids with the kinesthetic experience of scrapbooks. And this is the place where after they've designated what their life is, I want to know, generate all the ideas that might occur in your personal life, in your service to others, maybe something you would do to inspire, and maybe how you might make a living with that. So we didn't want kids to think of this, I'm going to grow up and do X, Y, and Z. I will tell you that we had one student who wanted to be a football player, and that's pretty common in junior high, and I thought, oh no, we're going to have to talk. So I'm sharing with him, and I said, okay, if you were a football player, what does that mean to you? And I was waiting for him to tell me he'd have a big house and a fancy car. And what he said to me is, I think I could raise a lot of money for a foundation to be able to cure brain cancer. My sister's best friend has it, and I think if I were a football player, I would be able to earn that kind of money. So he really had a dream in his heart in which he was going to use what he thought was his talent as a middle schooler to do good in the world. So asking those questions behind there really was helpful. So again, we prototyped this in Why Not. We made a big splash. We made T-shirts for the kids. We made room. And I have people saying, where are you going to find the time? And I'm thinking, how can you not find the time? We had newscasts inside of there. Parents come in. It was an awesome experience, an energy that I can never describe. Kids were running around talking to other kids that they either never met or never talked to and say, have you found your light yet? What is your light? Oh, I really like that. Yes, that fits you. Or, oh, I would never have guessed. And then we did this round robin circle where we would have kids announce to every person in the circle, my light is generating ideas. And the kids would respond, shine on. And then they would go around the circle and get that affirmation. It was really just sort of tingling to have kids experience that affirmation. This is CJ, who spent 2 days not writing anything, and finally the teachers sent me over to him and said, do something with him. He won't write. So I laid down on the floor with him. I said, what's going on? And he goes, well, everybody knows that nobody knows the future. He goes, I just think it's ridiculous for you to ask me to do this. And I said, you know, I bet you're kind of a scientist guy. And he goes, yes, I'm really good in science. And I said, well, I think that's great. But what are you going to do if you leave a blank screen? Because if you have a blank screen, someone else is going to write on it. And do you want to live in their story, or do you want to live in the story that you want to tell? And you're right, it might change over the years, but the substance won't change. And I'd like you to tell us what's the story you want to live in so you can be sure you're living in yours. You should never leave a blank screen. So I thought I kind of got his attention with his logical mind. And the next day people said, you're going to have to go back and work with this guy. And I said, what's wrong? I thought we got him going. They go, oh yeah, he's on his 5th or 6th page of writing. And every 100 words makes a minute of video. So he had gone way overboard. But he was such a good writer. So we worked at kind of getting down the essence of what his story needed to be. And he was so good at writing that I said to him, you know, CJ, you're really a good writer. He goes, no, I'm a scientist. I said, yeah, but what if you used your science and your writing skills to write young anthropology books like Indiana Jones and make adventures out of your anthropology? He also had been keeping a secret notebook that his parents didn't know about of names for bones. And I said, did you get those off the internet because that's copyright? And he goes, no, I've been making these names up since I was 7, and I'm going to use them when I do find my bones. Almost no one in the school or his teachers knew that he had this love. And to have him be in middle school, not so good. So one of the things I really like at the end of these I Imagine is we're 20 years into the future, and I asked for them to step back and give advice to their younger self. And this really started coming from their hearts. There's an app called Age Me where they can age their today's picture. And it's really pretty funny. I'd like to have one that makes me younger, but it was fun to see the kids kind of get into that. And we did some other props if they wanted to do that, or they could just leave their voice. But this is what CJ left. And I just thought it was so insightful. And I'm going to read it so that it's part of the audio. If I could tell my younger self some advice, it would be to let your heart lead you to where you want to be. And once you find your own light, it has no choice to shine. You'll think about it and you'll dream about it. And this was from CJ, and every one of my students' videos were like that. I'd also like to say that I had a gifted and talented teacher who did this with her 4th graders. And I don't know if you know this, but gifted and talented kids can often be hard on themselves when they don't get A's. So Elizabeth, as a teacher, was called down to work with this young girl who was in a puddle of tears because she hadn't won the spelling bee contest. And Elizabeth said to her, you know, do you remember the advice that you gave yourself? And she kind of sniffed and said yes. And she goes, well, share it back with me now. And the young girl said, I'm really smart, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to make mistakes. But those mistakes will not keep me from having the life I want to have. And Elizabeth says, well, how do you think it might pertain to this disappointment that I know you're having about the spelling bee? She goes, I can see it's not such a big thing, and I should just go on and know that I'm going to keep making my life I want. And I just thought that was so touching for that teacher to understand that that child needed to get a big perspective. So this is young Zal's thought, what if, instead of having curriculum to standardize our kids, we had curriculum that accelerated the talents of our kids, or at least made room for that. And I think there are things out there like Genius Hour and FedEx Days that we're trying to get a toehold into those kind of things, maybe the maker movement. But I think it needs to certainly have a larger place in our life. And I'd like to share just a couple of these stories to let you feel what they look like. So, Steve, if you'll cue up Mitchell's story. This is Mitchell's story 20 years from now. Enjoy. I really liked how he put all the clapping at the end. But again, it changes the neuroplasticity, you know, of what's possible for these kids. I'm going to have you cue up Aaron's story, Steve. And you know, I just feel like when we know what's in our kids' hearts, we have so many opportunities to shape the curriculum or learning experiences, an invitation to bring who they are into the room instead of lockstepping through sort of cookie-cutter projects that the kids do. This is an autistic child. And I'd like to speak to this just a little bit. She was in 6th grade. She had just been formally diagnosed with this, and it had taken a while. And the family didn't really want her doing this project. They wanted to protect her from this and the fact that it was going to be seen by 1,000 other middle school kids. Did they make well, kids use lots of things, but I think iMovie is certainly simple. We have a lot of choices, and I try not to get wedded to a video program, Eileen, but they do need to be able to have 2 soundtracks and at least 1, you know, image track. So I would watch that program. Anyway, this child went ahead and did this. We finally negotiated with their parents and teachers. I actually had a teacher come in before she turned it into a video to look at her writing and said, don't you think someone should tell her that with Asperger's she's not going to be able to do those things? I said, no, because if it's in her heart, you don't know what she's going to accomplish if she creates a story that not only she believes, but her family believes, and, you know, her teachers believe. So she was actually setting the stage for people to understand what lived in her heart. And Maureen, I do use Video Studio on the PC. It's probably one of my most favorite programs I've ever used on the PC. It's got a reasonable price, and it has all the functions you could possibly want. I've used it down into 3rd grade with ease. So yes, Becky, I agree with you to find that. So there's a process that in this certification program, and again, I have these 4 courses online where we talk about what is the rigor in the story prompts. The second course is craftsmanship on how to get great voices and to make sure those images work with the program and make it come alive. And all of the courses are standalone, so if you just want to jump into the craftsmanship to answer some of these technical questions that you have. I also want to share with that after we found out that CJ was an anthropologist, there was this project, and he got to be the head anthropologist designing the artifacts that were going to be buried for other kids to have a dig in. And that teacher would never have invited him in without having to, you know, understand what's in his heart. And we have so many, many opportunities like that that allow kids to have school be organized around their passions. So having said that, I'm going to back up, sorry for the recording, and have you share the snapshots picture. And we're heading into this, but before you show it, I want to say that this is an example of the elementary kids. They wrote their life story, what I would call a storyline, and then they picked one scene that they wanted to come alive. So it's a way to sort of short-circuit the amount of time involved, that I would expect the writing to be there. And then this is just a scene. This was done by third graders. Well, there were lots of other examples, but again, just letting it come alive for the kids, and we have a lot of variations that we leave in the curriculum. You know, I have always considered being a teacher sacred work, that we're not about standardizing and trying to make test scores. We're about unleashing their potential into the world, one child at a time. And there are so many stories that I know that you have that you do that anyway, but just imagine a whole school really getting it, and that the first conferences with your parents is a discussion about their passions and finding sponsors and ways for that to come alive for kids. So we're going to look at the last video clip, and then I'm going to do the wrap-up, and that is Sir Peter Benson's appeal that just says, where do you start? Just begin it. So we'll take that last clip, Steve. Well, here is more information I just put in the chat box to go out and get ideas and get the essence. If you're not interested in the curriculum, that's good for me. I just wrote it because it's my drop that I'm adding to the world. And I think a first place to start is to let our own hearts sing. We take the climate into our classrooms. Our teachers take their climate in. And we need to find ways to sort of lift up that spirit, that it can serve us even better. So I don't know all the ways that you might adapt this, but this is a Story People quote that I really believe in, that in the face of all the realities that we have, I just can't live with them. We have to expect more of ourselves. And this is a motto that I discovered through my own story project, da un jeichinho, and it means no is the wrong answer. And when you write stories and visions that have zest and passion, that is an 8 and 9 and 10, then no is the wrong answer. It has to happen. We have to work together. But if we don't have those compelling visions that are detailed and living in our hearts, no amount of strategic planning is ever going to go there. So please let us know all the ways that you might move forward with this, if there's any way that that would be Steve and I and all the people in this group, can work together to have this. But it's time to know our kids' dreams and visions. Thank you very much, and I will take some Q&A, but I would also say namaste, which means the spirit in me greets and honors the spirit in you. And at least in our mind's eye, we ought to be doing this with our kids every day, of greeting them with knowing that their spirits enter our sacred spaces in school. Thank you.
Wow, Bernajean, that was so fun. You know, we are at the top of the hour. For many, it's late. If you would like to ask Bernajean some questions, I'm really glad to have you do so, but if you need to go, please feel free to just exit the room, and we understand. You do all have the microphones. If someone would like to take the mic, feel free to do so, or you can put a note in the chat. So is Dao Jeitinho Portuguese?
Yes, it is. And, you know, I've had it on my business card for years, and I was doing my first digital storytelling with Joe Lambert in the Center for Digital Storytelling when I was struck with, this isn't just something new to do as a bandwagon. This is my work in the world, to cause trouble and to invite people to go to higher ground. And it's a story about me being on a family farm, and my dad wouldn't give me a horse. I don't know why, but it was the wrong answer. So at 7 years old, I got a little attitude that says, well, I'm going to have to get a horse anyway because I had to go round up cows every night, and it was really a tough job. So I spent the summer training a cow to be my horse. And it was kind of a big job, to be honest. But when I was trying to name this and what was the lesson learned in the message, I realized that I had been using this expression on my business cards for years, and I did not know where that story had started. So I realized that when someone tells me, no, it's not possible, it's the beginning of my passion and energy that says, well, we're just going to have to do it anyway. And I think we need not willfulness, but we need to say, I don't care what's in our way. We still have to do it if we're going to take care of the sacred work we have in the world. And Bombay Initiative, I'm not sure the context of that. Oh, Steve answered it.
No, I was actually translating the colloquial from the Portuguese.
Okay. For me, I've heard it means no is the wrong answer, work with me, work with me. No self-respecting Portuguese takes no for an answer at the bank, anywhere they're at. It's just the beginning of a conversation. If something needs to happen. And we certainly know that we need a revolution. And it's why I am so proud to work with Steve and all the people he gathers together.
Oh, you're so kind. That was so fun. Let's call it quits. Bernajean, thank you. I made lots of notes. You're going to be hearing from me. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'm clapping. You hover over the smiley face and go down to the applause. Namaste. Thanks, Bernajean. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to turn the recording off.